Hello, kiddies. It's your old pal John Kassir, the voice of the Crypt Keeper. And I hope you get to check out my good fiends at A Decade of Horror on the PSVG Podcast Network. I hope you love them like I do. They're a scream.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
What's up, ghouls and ghosts, and welcome to another episode of PSVG's A Decade of Horror, the latest podcast on the PSVG Podcast Network, where we relive the year that was 2015, one horror movie at a time. PSVG Scream Team is here once again. Myself, Lucas, and Josh Bones.
Boo!
Boo, that's your thing?
I'm a ghost. I'm a spooky ghost.
Terrible ghost, Josh. We got to work on that. I'm excited for this episode in a way that I don't think I've been excited about any other episode. I told you guys kind of leading up to this, I have what I think is a hot take for this episode that I'm sure it's going to come up. I'm sure. And I rewatched it with my wife, and I tried to validate my own feelings. And in particular, Josh, I don't think it's going to go well. So I've been kind of dreading, even, I guess, the show, as you could say, to pull a horror movie. So yes, but before we do that, let's get into everybody's favorite segment of the show, Fun Facts with Josh.
The reason they're here.
We need a jingle.
We're going to keep it going with 2014. We're going to do good and horrific to stick with the horrific theme.
Nice.
Good. Star Wars The Force Awakens is #1 at the yearly box office.
Oh, well, I don't know if I'd call that good. That movie was terrible for the following
You're thinking
reasons.
of The Last Jedi.
Oh.
According to the internet.
I remember that. I was there day one, opening night, had a blast.
You're thinking of the Mass Effect 3 of Star Wars movies, where they want the ending changed. In horrific news, Old Town Road is #1 in the Billboard charts.
Why do I feel like that was so much more
it's
recent
so close.
than that?
Yeah, because we had to hear it for 3 years since then.
Wow. If you would have asked me, like, if I was in Trivial Pursuit or something, I might have suggested that was like last year. I actually think I saw like that in a commercial reference or something, and I did. Like last week, I asked my wife, I was like, "Is that still a thing?"
Because you're thinking of the Billy Ray Cyrus not remaster.
Oh, you're talking about the original. I don't even know what that is.
OG, Old Town Road.
Oh, see, this is how much I'm not in the music scene. I don't even know. I was talking about the remix.
Yes, and that's what most people know as the only. So it's not on you. Most people only know it because of Billy Ray.
Like, you blew my mind. I was like, that was in 2015? No way.
I mean, according to the internets and based on this podcast history, there's a 70-30 chance I'm wrong. We'll get into the neutral news, the sports teams. I mean, this leans towards the positive for me, the hoorays. Capitals, the Washington Capitals win the Stanley Cup. The New England Patriots win the Super Bowl, not their last. The Royals win the World Series.
That's
and
awesome.
The Golden State Warriors take the NBA championship.
That's the one we deserved that we didn't have. We should have won that one. We shouldn't have won the one we did. We shouldn't have won the one we did, but we should have won that one. What's
your Cleveland basketball team, the Cleveland Browns?
What? That's a joke, right? Like, you didn't mean to say that? Okay.
That's a joke. I don't know if you remember this. I very vividly remember this. We had a total lunar eclipse. You actually had to get special glasses to watch it.
Is that the one you had to watch in the middle of the day?
Yeah, and you had to use those 3D glasses that weren't technically 3D glasses.
I think I was on a film shoot when this happened because I remember.
Oh, God.
I remember not being at home for this very
You had to skip
amazing
lunch with
occasion.
Spielberg. You just couldn't.
Well, you didn't
make
have to
it
be
that
at
day.
home. You could have seen it anywhere, Lucas. It was a total
I did see
lunar
it.
eclipse.
We looked at it with our special glasses.
There's a gift.
I was working, and I was on the roof of my school watching it with some teachers.
There's an emoji of me in the Discord.
I was just going to ask that.
Yes,
Isn't
that is the
of
lunar
you?
eclipse.
I remember being let down. I didn't think it was all that great.
Oh, I thought it was the coolest thing I'd seen since Haley's
At our
Comet.
place, it didn't get really dark. Like, it didn't get dark at all, actually.
Oh,
It was kind of like a cloud.
okay. Oh,
Like, it was-
I know what you're saying.
Like, it was still very bright outside, you know? So, like, it
Yeah.
wasn't like this big event, you know,
I
that you
think it
see in,
only
like, the
hit
movies and stuff.
the equator for total no sun. I think it was just at the equator that happened.
Oh, okay.
I was more disappointed because the gates of hell didn't open like they were supposed to,
Mm.
and demons didn't start
I mean,
pouring out
I
of
went
the
in there with the impressions of, like,
2012.
Apocalypto and just came out really let down. I was like, what is this?
I hear you.
minor annoyance.
Lame.
That's kind of like the build up to the number one of this episode.
Oh no.
We had in horrific news. We had a 7.8 earthquake that hit Nepal, India, China, and Bangladesh, killing 9,018 people.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yikes.
We also, in horrific news, and also obvious news, we found out that FIFA is corrupt as hell. And the whole board basically stepped down in what is essentially almost a mafia style organization where they were lining their pockets and got caught.
Yikes.
It was gross.
I didn't even think I even knew that.
And
Like, that's new to me. That's how little I
think
follow
I-
soccer. I'm like, wow.
I think I only know because The Simpsons did an episode on it or something, and I wasn't even watching The Simpsons at that time. Yeah.
Yeah. Horrific news. I didn't list individual things because there were so many and it would just turn into a sad podcast. We are inundated with ISIL and ISIS attacks worldwide.
Mm.
Good news. Cuba and the U.S. bury the hatchet. You can now go visit Cuba. You can stay there.
Oh, yeah.
Everything's cool. Just like that with a snap of a finger.
We were like, we don't even know what we were fighting about.
I don't even think about you. It's just Donald Draper.
Think of you. Yeah, you just nail them to the wall.
Who?
And just like have sad feelings for the rest of their life. I don't even think
Cuba? Is that still a thing, huh?
NASA, good news, NASA finds water on Mars. Big news.
Yeah.
For the 2015.
The sci-fi thriller industry rejoices.
Oh, there you go. And Matt
Something
Damon
new to write about.
eating out potatoes as he reads it. More good news. Justin Trudeau becomes Prime Minister of Canada. Spoilers. A few years later, they find out he did blackface. Notable deaths. Terry Pratchett. B.B. King. For Donnie, we got Dusty Rhodes and Roddy Piper.
Oof.
Wes Craven and Yogi Berra.
Wes Craven.
All hats, 2015. Good news. Hamilton debuts on Broadway officially. I'm sure it was in previews before that.
And everybody I know was priced out of watching it.
Exactly. Well, the first year you could get in good.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, but I didn't know what it was the first year.
Nobody did.
Exactly.
In fact, people are like Broadway musical about Alexander Hamilton. No, thank you.
Boring.
Donnie pretty much predicted this one. Mad Men ends in 2015. Coca-Cola deal that everyone and no one saw coming simultaneously. In a Who Cares news, Jon Snow, quote, dies, end quote.
Oh, yeah. That's right. Back when it was good.
Also, in not good, not bad news, we have The Jinx and Making a Murderer both become huge hits in 2015. The Jinx being the HBO documentary where they literally catch a murderer on tape saying he killed people.
Yep.
And Making a Murderer, the Netflix documentary where they never figure out what the hell happened.
that documentary is fascinating.
It's fascinating in how someone filmed a documentary about it.
Yep.
Caitlyn Jenner is born And to end 2015, Jessica Jones, Narcos, and Kimmy Schmidt dominate Netflix ratings. Also premiere that year.
And we're immediately
As I
canceled.
say, he canceled next year.
Well, Narcos run for 5 seasons, 4 seasons. Jessica Jones went for 3. Kimmy Schmidt went for 4 in a movie. I think pretty successful, you critics.
I was just making a joke.
You're right in the eye, you critics.
Wow.
You got me.
Nailed you.
Well, well, are you prepared to be outraged by this year's top dominating, grossing
I am
U.S. box office movies?
most curious I've been about a year since we've done it. So
I have 15 movies that cracked my short list for this year
Ooh.
alone.
Can we do this now?
I hope none of them will be
I'm
the top 3.
I-
Oh wait, no, one of them will be.
Yeah, I'm actually, I don't think any of these, I think one of them could be just because of the actors that were in it, but it didn't crack my top 3. I don't
Donnie,
expect
I
any
had
of my top 3 to
14.
be on here.
I had 14, the most we've done since.
Wow. Yeah.
9
So
was mine.
before we get to the box office stuff, let me ask you guys this.
Yeah.
I don't know how much you guys might relate or not relate to this. I didn't really have a strong, favorable pick for this year. I feel like I have a lot of like B pluses.
Number 2s.
I have
Yeah.
a lot of 2s and 3s. I probably have
Yeah.
10 of those. And like, there was no, for me, there's no Babadook here. You know, there was no like, oh my God, I'm going to go Trump for this one. Like, I had a hard time kind of pulling together the list.
I had that feeling. I had to rewatch a lot to really. I had the movies written out
Yeah.
with no particular order, and then I had to watch them to order them, basically.
Yeah.
So this is where a lot of my rewatching went.
I had an interesting thing happen to me during last episode where my number 1 for last episode became my number 1 for this episode,
Mm-hmm.
and my number 1 for this episode became my number 1 for next episode.
Okay.
Wow.
That is not the most messed up thing. I went through all that emotionally while you guys were talking about the third movie, which I didn't even retain what it was.
Oh.
Melton.
So Lucas, let us know what the masses chose.
Sure. Number 3. I'm sure we'll all be really favorable towards this movie. Do you remember The Perfect Guy?
No.
What?
Yeah.
I've
me
never
either.
heard of this.
I just want to be clear that this is coming up on the horror.
Not to be confused
I
with The Invisible
specifically-
Man, the perfect guy. What?
Oh. After breaking up with her boyfriend, a professional woman. What a weird girl by day, professional woman at night.
That was great.
I just read
I
it.
know what it is.
Just whatever's on the teleprompter.
Yep. A professional woman gets involved with a man who seems almost too good to be true.
18% on Rotten Tomatoes.
That sounds about right.
36 Metascore. It made $57 million.
What? This is why people are in the film game.
What's the budget? Do you have the budget?
$8.
Let me see if I can find it. Budget is 12 million estimated.
Hey, good for them.
Yeah, right?
They did something.
Wow.
They made a thing.
Yeah,
I know what number 1 is.
this is brand new to me. Okay.
So I'm guessing some sort of thriller / horror. Guy turns out too good to be true.
Yeah.
Turns out he is, or whatever.
thriller.
Terrible. Awful. Number 2, we have a horror movie, an actual horror movie. It's called The Visit, talking about getting older.
Shyamalan?
Number 3.
Yeah. Oh, I see. I thought there might be a chance. $65 million, better than The Perfect Guy, at least. A 55 Metascore. Again, the higher end of what you could possibly.
That's a
attain
horror.
for.
That's a horror 9.
Yeah. Hey, is number 1 Gers Berms?
Oh my God, Gershberms, number 1. You're right. A movie that is Is it
Not a horror
horror? It's kid horror, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's so no surprise there. If you are counting a family comedy adventure as also being horror because it's loosely based on books that were scary when you were in third grade.
What's next? Particular the movie? What's going on over here?
What's the other one? I mean, at least Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark was actually like
Scary movie.
scarring. Yeah. So yeah, the Jack Black vehicle to
So
go
now-
and see.
So now now that we've gotten to 2015, I'm not exactly sure what's the more depressing segment: fun facts with Josh or box office hits with Lucas.
No, I haven't even got to the depressing part. This earned $80 million. Well, of course it did, though, right? It's a
Lucas, if
family
it was
movie.
animated, it would have made $800 million.
That's true.
That's true.
That's
yeah.
true.
Wow. Okay. Well, spoilers aside, I'll go ahead and kick us off. My number 3 is The Visit. I think the way that it tracked on your list is because it was directed by M. Night Shyamalan.
Yeah.
Who I wrote down is a legend. How do you
He
guys
is
feel about that statement? It's true, right?
I love him as a director.
So do
and
I.
He gets a lot of crap because
He's had some misses.
but
I was going to say he's hit and miss.
Everybody's hit and miss, though.
he makes films that people don't like the ending, and that really is like critical for directors. You have the studio pressuring you to make a happy ending, and his movies never have one.
But I think it's also, too, that he was... I don't know. He was somebody's golden boy or something because he was constantly trotted out and like your brain is going to be somehow.
I just say, Carpenter
you're gonna
had
have this-
misses. George Romero has had more misses than he's had hits, but nobody thinks of him like people I think of M. Night Shyamalan.
But yeah, and M. Night Shyamalan has been kind of put on a pedestal. In the early 2000s, that he was like the next creative genius
He
or
was the next
something.
one,
and
yeah.
so when he hits real high, but when he misses, it's just like the expectation was so high that it feels worse.
I think with respect to your point, I think he has always been given a lot of big blockbuster attempts. And that's where it's kind of different from some of the older folks where they had a lot of misses, but they were low budget indie flicks that if you missed, they just went away. His misses were trotted out, on Hollywood stage for everybody to throw, to pick and prod at.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. But I will think the important thing to me is when you say that a director is legendary or iconic, that they have a movie type, right? This is a M. Night Shyamalan movie, right?
I think he does.
Yeah, I would agree. And I mean, that's not the only criteria, but it is a very large part of it.
I wrote down Split, Signs, The Sixth Sense, The Village. These are horror movies I love. I think those are great movies.
They made money too. I mean,
everybody
that was the
hates The
important part.
Happening. I don't love it. I kind of don't hate it though. Like I enjoyed The Happening. I have.
What I think about M. Night, right? I think so. I missed this one. I really wanted to see this.
The Happening's better than Lady in the Water.
Oh yeah, that was the other one I was going to bring up. Those are his two big misses. The Visit was a movie that I like. When this movie came out, this was the return to form, right? Everyone's like, "Oh, he's back!" Like it's M. Night's. Like this is his.
Yeah.
Like he's back to form, and I really wanted to see it. I honestly didn't see it because old people being terrifying.
Yeah, it's scary.
Really
See, I wasn't wrong. I told you last episode it is scary.
Although
terrifying.
at this point it was getting a little bit cliche, maybe not cliche, but we had seen it before.
We saw Hansel and Gretel Witch Hunters with Jeremy Renner.
Taking of Deborah Logan, some other ones where the older generation, It Chapter 2, there's an older lady in there that does stuff, and
well,
it's
that
like
was later, but it
was later, but it continues on.
Mm-hmm.
But initially I knocked it for that slightly, but I did end up watching it, and it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. Like as much as I basically wanted it to be, like putting it on going, oh, this is gonna be terrible or whatever, but it wasn't terrible.
So I wrote, I rewatched this last week. It's the second time I've watched it. I haven't watched it since the first time. The first time I watched it, I loved it. Before I get into it, since we were talking about M. Night Shyamalan, one of the notes that I wrote was, I remember the first time I heard about this movie, because this was a movie that I was tracking before release because of the director. I remember thinking that found footage was beneath him. Do you guys think you attribute anything like that to directors when you hear a story, something like that? Like, M. Night Shyamalan's doing a found footage movie. I was like, why?
I didn't even know it was found footage, to be honest with you. I just remember seeing
it's
the-
kind of not, but it is. But yeah, before we get to that, so I just want to say I had those impressions. So I think maybe the fact that it surprised me so much, I think I might have enjoyed it more. So here's what I wrote. It's a great premise. Divorced mom sends kids to they're her parents' house. Here's the twist. They have never met their grandparents. Mom had been like basically, left for some time. So the kids get there and you have this lovable grandpa and this lovable grandma and, they bake cookies and they play Yahtzee and they do all the things, right? But then at night, grandpa locks the kids in the room and you hear strange, scary stuff happening outside the door. And then the next day they open the door and they're like, hey, let's go out and have fun, kids. And it's just like your grandpa. So it's a little scary. You're like, uh-oh, something's here afoot. You find out later that grandma like climbs walls and scratches walls and runs around the house naked at night. It's totally freaky and scary. She tries to eventually like break into the room. The thing that I love most about this movie is that it's funny in a way that I don't think people expect. Probably you, Josh. It's actually quite funny. Several times when I watch this movie, I laugh out loud because it's also self-aware, but not in the parody type as you would expect. M. Night Shyamalan kind of foreshadows or talks to the crowd through the protagonist and the girl. She's an aspiring filmmaker. So at times she even goes out of the way to tell you what's about to happen. She's like, I want to bring the people on an emotional journey. I want highs and lows. I'm going to try to capture the drama of this scene while all of this is happening around you. And you're like, yeah. So I think on the second watch, you kind of are more like, when you know that and you have that awareness, a lot of that becomes more, at the forefront of watching it than it doesn't. It's basically When a Stranger Calls. Classic story, right? You guys have seen it, right? The call is coming from inside the house. So you have all these creepy things happening, but the kids, they're just like old people. Like they're old. We'll deal with it until they Skype cell phone call their mom and show the grandparents, and she's like, kids, those aren't my parents. Get out of the house.
Yeah.
And then the whole that's the twist, right? So if you've never seen it, so Josh has just ruined the movie for you. That's the twist of the movie.
Okay.
That's the village.
17-year-old movies.
That's the village twist. That's the twist, is that they're not the people you think. They've actually killed her parents, and then it becomes a struggle to get out, and then, the movie endings, and I'm not going to spoil the ending to anything. I think it's charming at times to see the kids with the grandparents. I think it lures you in that way. I think it's odd in a way that keeps your attention. They do just enough things that seem out of place that you keep paying attention. And then at times when it needs to be scary, it's scary. I don't think it's the greatest movie I've ever seen, but I think it's better than Happening. I really like it. And I think M. Night Shyamalan was enough to make number 3 for me.
I think the big hurdle in that movie was getting over the idea that a mom would send her kids to their grandparents' house without because they barely talk. It
takes a leap of faith.
Yeah, exactly. And once you get over that, it's okay. But yeah, there's that really big.
You know what? But here's the thing.
There.
Here's the thing. I will give you an actual fun factoid. My mom sent me to stay with my dad when I was 7 years old, whom I had never met. And she put me on a plane in Columbus, Ohio, and flew me to Atlanta, Georgia, to where I got off the plane, and a stranger told me he was my dad, and I went home with him. Now, the stewardesses and everything, they checked his ID and everything. It was all, pre-planned.
Up and up, but still, yeah.
But just to put your criticism in, I think it's possible.
It could happen.
Is it likely? No. Can it happen? Right. Sure. Especially if the kids are traveling far away.
That's the thing that's hard to get over too, is movies are about the times where it's like the one time that the thing that makes sense didn't happen.
Yeah.
And like once you accept that, it's a lot easier to accept horror movies, because the notion is always to go, well, yeah, but if they just did this, or if somebody
This
was
is
smart
such a
about
great
it.
discussion, because this happens all the time. My wife, when she watches horror movies, it's like she's playing a game of Clue. She's trying to figure. I'm like, will you just sit down and enjoy the damn movie? Like, just eat some popcorn, and I think it's because I watch so many horror movies that I never have that skeptical mind. I'm always just willing to sit on the ride. I'm like, well, if this is what they want you to believe, and believe it. Because
what are Jason's motivations? Why is he doing it?
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. So I really liked it. Number 3. Let's see here. Josh.
Hey, my number 3. I couldn't really decide between Sharknado 3, Oh Hell No, or Tremors 5, Bloodlines. So I
hell yes.
went with The Gift.
Yeah.
Oh. This movie has always been something I've been interested in, and I'll be honest.
I was expecting to see it on a box office ranking.
I mean, yeah, I was most interested because it was written and directed by Joel Edgerton, who also acted in it, and he is a pretty famous actor.
Yeah, he's been in lots of stuff.
He's in so many things. I mean, he plays Uncle Owen in Star Wars, which also ties into me watching the documentary on Nixium, where the woman who plays Aunt Beru was in Nixium, the cult, by the way.
Zero Dark 30. He's in Warrior. Yeah. These are all things that I know him from.
He was great in Warrior.
Yeah.
He's the brother of Warrior. Yeah, he's in The Thing.
Oh wow.
He's in a lot of movies. He's
I forgot about this one.
He's a Midnight Special. He's a character actor, right? So he's very easy to forget.
Yeah.
And in fact, the character he plays in this film is so like he gets into this character.
Cerebral.
You don't even know. Yeah, cerebral. Thank you. The film stars Jason Bateman.
Mm-hmm.
And this is before he did Ozark, so he wasn't even doing drama. And Rebecca Hall, who I adore to death. I also think she's one of the most beautiful actresses.
It's a theme running with Josh's picks for movies
on the market. But she does such a great job in this film. So essentially, what this movie is about is Jason Bateman and his wife. They move away from wherever they were. They don't really tell you too much information.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of find out through the journey of the film. They lost a child. They were expecting a baby. They didn't have one. He works for this pretty big, I guess, investment firm, perhaps. I might be blurring Ozark into this. Some type of job. You don't really know what he's doing. And like the first day they move back to this town and they buy this super nice house, which, by the way, in a horror movie or thriller, if you want a house where all of your outside facing windows are glass, that's a problem. Don't move into a house where every room in your house has a glass window.
Wall,
he's saying don't throw stones. Glass houses.
Yeah, essentially. You can see into this house at all points of day and night.
I always feel it's a little on the nose.
It is a bit on the nose. I think they play with it. They use it intentionally, obviously. Otherwise, they wouldn't have picked that house. But
right.
I think they do it in a good way, so it's not cliche. The first day they're back in town, Jason Bateman's character runs into Joel Edgerton, a kid he grew up with in high school. And essentially, it's called The Gift because Joel Edgerton is like welcoming them to the neighborhood, and he keeps sending them gifts. It's very like off-putting, and this movie does a great job at making you feel sympathy for the antagonist.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
You don't necessarily even know he's the antagonist.
Mm-hmm.
And spoiler alert, he's not really the antagonist. He is a person who was done wrong. He is a revengist. I'm going to coin that as a verb. He's the revenger.
The revenger.
I need that movie.
Revenger is a symbol.
He does like they definitely play him off to be maybe on the spectrum.
Yeah.
Very uncomfortable and awkward. But Jason Bateman's wife is constantly defending him, right? He's like, oh, he's just awkward. Jason Bateman's very uncomfortable with it. As you progress through the movie, you kind of figure out Jason Bateman,
Kind of a jerk.
you think he's a protagonist, he's awful.
Yeah.
He's a terrible human being. I don't wish what happened to him to happen to him, but you really find out what he's made of in the motivations of Joel Edgerton's character. This movie, like I said, this was the first time I saw it. It really caught me by surprise. I got it confused with The Box, I think, the Cameron Diaz movie.
Yeah, similar.
So I didn't even really know what I was getting myself into. But this was a movie I discorded to Donnie and Lucas, saying, like, I found a new genre of films.
Oh, so this was the new one.
It really just
I was
plays
going to ask
on,
if anybody thinks this is more thriller than horror. Not that I'm trying to discredit or not, but
yeah,
it's on my list. It's on my list. It's not on my top 3, but it's on my list.
It's definitely more thriller, but I really think it played on my empathy.
Yeah.
I'm a very empathetic person in real life, so like I felt very much uncomfortable, and I think that's going to be a trend for the next at least 2 years in horror films that we discuss.
Sure.
There's definitely horror elements to it, right?
Yep.
But we are always towing this line between thriller and horror, and what is what. I think they can be the same. Right?
It's so funny because so many horror movies now, like actual horror movies, get lopped into like the thriller genre now.
Yeah.
Whereas I've always taken it the opposite way, where horror was the overarching, and you can have comedic horror, and you can have thriller horror, and you can have slasher horror. But yeah, it seems like it's like horror and thriller just being put together, like psychological thrillers.
Yeah. Anything that's just off-putting, you know what I mean? Anything that makes you uncomfortable, I would just kind of lop into horror.
We're like the D, all of the above category.
Yeah, horror. I mean, it's just whatever's horrible to you.
Yeah.
What's that, Josh?
If you can picture yourself in that situation, that's horror for you.
Of course.
Like you guys talked about Babadook, right? Like scarier after kids, which I also find a lot of movies after I had a kid are different. This is a very similar. Like eventually they have a kid, and have you guys seen this film?
I have. I love that I love that it made your list, because one of the things that I love about it, I think more than anything, is like how it brings up like it kind of plays with the notion of like your past, like kind of coming back to haunt you. In a realistic way, not in a supernatural horror, like, you know, I know what you did last summer way, like in a real way. And I think I think the part that becomes horrific or terrifying, because I think terror is a way of being into the horror genre without being supernatural or, eclectic. I think that is something that I think we all probably live with some regret, and this is just playing on that at an exaggerated level. And it makes you almost self-aware of like, oh man, I might have not treated that person in 3rd grade like the best way. I hope he doesn't show up with a present one day.
Right.
When he's given that opportunity to make amends, he just shows his true colors.
Right. And
then immediately you're like, but I still don't know that I agree with his ending it makes sense. But this is another movie where, without saying what happens, but I can say the ending, like the bad guy wins.
Yep.
And we don't even know, the viewer doesn't even know how the bad guy wins. The bad guy wins psychologically, but we don't even know to the extent as to what he did. He just wins by destroying this guy's life.
That is something in movies that my wife, Melissa, cannot stand. It is an immediate deal breaker. She hates being left with any open ending, anything that she has to think of. And most often I'm with you, but there's another movie later in years as we continue along this journey together. There's another movie that I think is a fantastic movie, except for the fact that it completely leaves it like wide open, like too open, way more open than I would ever want. And that was like my biggest thing to take away, but I like how you bring it up.
That happens too. I definitely agree with that. Certain films, they don't wrap up correctly. Also, I talked way too long about my number 3.
No,
so
it's good.
Number 2 and 1.
No, I'm glad that you brought it up too, because it kind of fell off my radar after having watched it. So I sort of forgot that I had seen it. And then when you started talking about it again, I was like, oh yeah, The Gift. That's right. Because I did like it. So
yeah, it was so good. I was shocked.
My number 3 is a movie that I had seen. I actually had to go to a specific theater downtown that shows typically smaller run indie films and that type of thing just to watch this movie. And I remember my friend Jason's wife was actually really pumped to see this. She had seen a trailer for it and shared it with me, and like we were geeking out to go see this. And the movie is Good Night Mommy.
Number 2.
That's your number 2?
Yep.
Cool.
Cool.
I rewatched it again because what happened was I think this movie suffered from some bad marketing from the American side because it was sort of marketed as a paranormal thing that was going to happen. Or at least that's the impression that I remember getting from watching the trailers. And it was not that. However, having watched it again recently, it didn't really matter to me, honestly. Being removed from the fact that I saw the marketing so long ago, that didn't matter. And I was curious to see knowing what happens and what the backstory is for the movie, having already known and figured all of that out, how would that affect the second viewing? So I'm glad that I went back and watched it. But if you're not familiar with it, it's about a mother who it's alluded that she was in some sort of accident or something and required plastic surgery. And there are 2 children that she has living at home. And when she comes home, she's got her face all bandaged up. Yeah.
One of them's name is
that's creepy.
One of them's name is also Lucas.
Except for they don't say Lucas, they say Lucas. Like
Lucas.
that, which
Lucas.
Ugh, it's weird. Yes, they are twins. Identical, basically. And they start to suspect that their mother, who has returned and is acting very different, at least from what they remember, is not their mother. And this movie really plays into the idea that this may or may not actually be their mom. And so when she comes home, she's had facial reconstructive surgery, and
it's a Travolta moment.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, sorry, gotta smile to make sure both sides of my face work. So you guys ever do that? You just stop and go like, "Am I having a stroke?" Or no, I'm good.
Cockroach on their mother.
What's that?
They put a cockroach on her.
Oh, they do way worse than that.
They do a lot.
Way worse than that.
This is like The Good Son, times 2 because there's 2 of them.
That's good. It's good. Apropos, as I say, there's a lot of. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. Keep going.
I was just gonna say, so they do a really good job of taking something very ordinary, which is the way that the mom is wrapped up and has to be wrapped up after this facial reconstructive surgery. I got it. She looks creepy. Like her face is all puffed up. Her eyes are dark. The mask looks almost Michael Myers-ish. I don't know. It's very pale, kind of, not in the sense that it's a face, but in the sense that it gives you this feeling that like she looks soulless almost.
I was going to say, it's almost inhuman.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
you don't have expression, you don't have body language, so it's easy to believe what the kids are selling.
Exactly.
Question: after watching the trailer, are you telling me that children aren't the villains in this film? Because they are terrifying.
I guess it depends on.
That looks super creepy, and they try to kill their mother.
Okay, well, I mean, we talked about we're spoiling anything we talk about.
Sure.
So,
Yeah,
spoiler alert. What ends up happening is they basically up the stakes and decide that they're going to tie her up and torture her until she admits that she's not their mom, because she does, to be fair, she does act in a way that does not make this unbelievable. They do a really good job of like setting this up. So I'm glad that you agree with me, because I don't really have another perspective to look at it.
No, that's spot on. It doesn't feel familial in behavior, but also the tale that they tell leads you down the road that you feel like the kids are in danger. So Josh, just like the GIF where you were talking about how, they're making you feel one way, this movie leans real heavily into that to kind of lead you down a path, and then they twist it and they kind of turn it on you to kind of come back around.
Well, boy.
Yes. And so I won't ruin that particular twist for you or tell you how this ends, but I will say the reason why it's number 2 for me, or number 3 for me, is because while I enjoyed it, the actual narrative structure, it really doesn't it takes a long time for things to really kick in. And when it does, it's like, oh, okay, this is what I'm here for. This is what's happening. Now I see why this is in the horror genre or whatever. But it doesn't really get going until the third act. And for me, it was just a little bit too late. Upon second watching, I kind of felt like I just wanted to skip to this, towards the middle of the second act, because I already knew about what happened.
Because you already knew.
Yeah. And so knowing, just because I knew it doesn't necessarily mean it should take away from the movie. But in this case, I kind of felt like it did a little bit. And so that's why for me, I was kind of like, well, on second viewing, having that feeling, I kind of feel like it deserves to be at number 3 instead of number 2 or number 1. So
I think that's
still very good though.
I think that slow build is necessary to pull off its effect. It has to lull you into believing into the whatever they're trying to weave, and without it, I don't think it's nearly as effective. I
totally
too
agree.
have a friend named Jason who put me off to this movie. I saw it when it came to streaming, so I was a little late to it, and I had never heard about it before, and I watched it, and it was a definite hit with the wife. The directors, Veronica Franz and Severin Fiala, also directed The Lodge, which is foreshadowing, comes later, another movie that I quite enjoyed quite a bit.
Yes, I think you told me about that one.
Yeah, I like that
I
one a
watched
bit.
that one.
So Goodnight Mommy was awesome. It is definitely kind of like the old Village. If you ever watch the old one with the kids, the twins with the white hair and stuff, there's similarities there. There's funny games kind of similarities stuff there. Obviously I'm gonna ruin one of the scenes. They glue her mouth shut. Yeah. And then when they realize that she can't eat, then they cut it open.
Minimal dialogue too, and a lot of space.
It's kind of a quiet movie.
Yeah, it really is.
It really is. It's very quiet, and I think it's really cool because it leaves you to fill in all that time, and you're kind of like, well, is this happening? Is that happening? Is this happening? That's happening? So you your mind is left to wonder as these strange things are kind of unraveling slowly, and I think that actually builds some of the tension. I think is. I've never watched it more than once. I've only watched it the first time, but the first time I watched it, because it wasn't too long ago, I definitely remember thinking it might be worse than it was ever going to be. That's kind of the sense that I always had. I was like, oh man, this is going to get real bad. And it never really does. It's not a gruesome movie. It's not even all that gross, even with what I just explained. Compared to other movies in the genre, it's not that bad, but it's very effective. It's very effective. Mm-hmm. And I won't reveal the twist either, because if you reveal the twist, it's kind of not worth watching. But there's a twist if you pay attention, and it's quite good. It was my number 2, so I'll pass and I'll hand it back to Josh.
Oh, okay. Well, my number 2 is a film in the vein of Cabin in the Woods. It's a tongue-in-cheek horror movie / love letter to horror fans, and it is called The Final Girls, which is what I was rewatching right before we started recording. And in fact, I was just at the ending. The Final Girls is a film that has an incredible cast of comedic performers and dramatic, but has Malin Ackerman, Tessa Farmiga, who is, I really don't know why she's not working way more than she has been. Thomas Middleditch is in it. Adam Devine. There's a lot of there's a great cast in this film. However, you could even kind of put the cast aside. One of the guys from the Hunger Games is in it. I don't remember his name.
Tessa's in American Horror Story, just to give you
Yes, and
Ties,
she's
yeah.
great in American Horror Story.
Mm-hmm.
I keep wanting to say sister. I don't know if she's the sister or daughter of Vera Farmiga, but she's one of those.
Can I just give everybody a warning that there apparently are a lot of movies, or at least two other ones called The Final Girls.
Sure.
So
So there's the
just
final girl, and then there's the final girls.
yes, and then there's another one. Yeah,
There's
Final Girl, Final Girls, and another The Final Girls in 2018.
Yeah. So this is the
Terrible.
Final Girls, and I know Final Girl is a movie with Abigail Breslin from Zombieland and Little Miss Sunshine. This is the one that she is not in.
Just look out for the comedians.
So essentially, this is a film where Tessa Farmiga, she plays the daughter of Malin Ackerman, who is a B movie actress trying to make her way up in the industry, right? And she's like, I've been in Grey's Anatomy, but people always remember me from essentially Sleepaway Camp, but it has a different title in this film. And the movie starts off with her daughter waiting for her to come out of an audition. Her daughter sees her like smoking a butt, like realizing her mom's down on her luck, realizing the audition didn't go well. They're driving. Her daughter spills coffee on her headshots, and
Headshot.
she screams like, "Oh, those are so expensive! Careful!" And then they get in a car accident. The mom dies in the car accident. So the daughter still living. Cut to like high school life. Boy, a hot guy who's essentially too into her, according to Aliyah Shawkat from who's in Arrested Development, who plays George Michael's cousin, who he loves. She's also in this, and I can't believe I didn't mention, to keep on with my theme of objectifying women.
At least you know about it.
The girl from Vampire Diaries, and now I can't remember her name.
Girl from Vampire.
Nina Dobrev is in it, who provides the eye candy, I guess.
Watch out. Careful.
Yeah, they're all in it, and basically, we cut to a point where it's her mom's death anniversary, but it's also the film anniversary. So there's this screening for the film, and Tessa Farmiga has to show up to like say something and honor her mom.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Kellen Lutz might be the name of the actor. So they go to the screening, and it's almost like straight out of Last Action Hero. Like a fire gets set into the theater, all the exits are blocked, and the only way they can get out is by cutting their way through the screen. And a guy cosplaying as the killer dropped his machete. It's a parody Jason killer.
Yeah.
In this film, like he's bullied as a kid, and someone throws fireworks in an outhouse, which gives him third-degree burns, which causes him to kill all the camp counselors. So they cut their way through the screen, and then they all wake up together, not realizing where they are, and they actually are in the film. And they're kind of living out this moment. This is the very cabin in the woodsy part, right? It's very tongue-in-cheek. The opening scene of the movie happens to them. So like the girl who takes all her clothes off is riding in this Volkswagen with Adam Devine, who's driving, who's the horn dog.
That makes sense.
Directions to the camp, and they're all shocked. Like nobody reacts. So the girl's like, "Oh, you guys are weird," and they just drive away. But then, like 17 seconds later, the same thing happens. The van drives by them again, basically leading them to have to fulfill the film.
Yeah.
So then finally, like Thomas Middleditch is like, "Oh, we're camp counselors. We can tell you to get there." And then like they're living out this movie, and there's a point where like they're confronted with a killer. They're like, "Hey, this is the part where the killer kills that girl who's going to have sex with this guy in the woods. Let's watch." And then they watch. And then like Thomas Middleditch ends up out there, and the killer's right behind him. And they're like, "Dude, you gotta get out of there." He's like, "He's not gonna kill us. He doesn't even know like who we are. He can't like, and then he kills Thomas Middleditch, or we think he does. He puts a machete through his side, and then everyone freaks out. So then you realize all these people that are in this movie can now be affected, but they also know how the movie plays out. So they're trying to like, and the mind fuck of the movie is like the main character Tessa Farmiga. She's in this movie with her mom, Malin Ackerman, who's dead,
Who
but
she's
her
lost.
character is alive.
Right,
Oh,
so
yeah.
she's got that grief and that
Yeah.
unwanting to let go.
And this movie turns from a horror parody to a flat out you'll cry watching this drama.
Oh
It
no.
is so touching. Like the turn it takes, it's so there's so much like human element in this movie. It is like so strong. However, there's so much comedy and actual horror intertwined that you don't even know what type of like genre of film you're watching. It's kind of clever in the way they deal with it, and like people come back that you thought were dead, and then they die again.
Yeah, that's an apt description.
And
Interesting.
and there's a part where if a flashback happens, they go to black and white, and they're like, "What the fuck? I can't see colors. Am I colorblind?" And they're like, "No, dude, you're in a flashback." So they like relive certain things in the flashback, which they also use later in the movie to fight the bad guy, like to call up a flashback. And the whole thing through the whole movie is the final girl, right?
Mhm.
That love letter to horror fans. There has to be a final girl. And they kind of changed the plot of the movie, the way that the original movie was, that her mom was in. However, it might not be in the way you think. And it still has to come down to like literally only one girl can survive.
Yeah.
So it comes down to that. And then all of a sudden, like the one girl, I won't say who it is, gets like Bruce Lee powers and is able to like flip machetes and like really take on this bad guy, this Jason knockoff. And then there's a pretty fun ending that isn't probably what you're expecting either. I rented it because you can't stream it anywhere, but I love this movie so much. I rented it for like $4 on Google Play. It's also $4 to rent on Xbox and Amazon. You can buy it for $12 in HD, but I really like this film a lot. It could have been number one if my number ones didn't change from the years before and after.
I have this movie on the shelf, on the Blu-ray, and watched it a few times. I think you're right. It is definitely like a love letter. It plays on all the tropes in all the right way. It is a telling story. It's very emotional at times. I could see Josh's empathy being really invested into it. I also don't think it's the reason it didn't crack my top 3, although it's definitely on the list of movies that I would bring up. It doesn't crack my top 3 because I don't think it's particularly like good. And I think to be honest with you, I think it's intentionally bad. They really like play up the campy parts and tropes of horror movies to a way where it's just cringy at times. For me, at least with some of the effects and stuff like that. Not the effects, but some of the tropes and the little things that they do. And honestly, I think it's just like Adam Devine's blend of comedy. It's just kind of like that way. So there's a lot of that there. But it's very, very good. And horror fans should definitely put it on their list to watch because it's, if for nothing else, it's extremely creative in how they play off of what the viewer would expect from a movie and would expect from a situation like that. And they honestly, like, it's basically about a movie getting to live in a movie. Everybody's like, oh, like, what would you do in a horror movie? That's basically what the movie's about. It's a horror movie about what would happen if you were in a horror movie. So it's neat. It's definitely novel. It's definitely new. It's refreshing.
Cool. I put it on my list. I sounds like something that I would enjoy, and I think it's important for movies not to be just one genre.
Sure.
Like if you're not blending genres, it's hard these days.
That was an apt description because there's a lot of things you could say about that movie. That movie really kind of stands on its own. It's kind of its own thing.
Nice. Well, then I guess I will hit you up with my number 2. Coming in for the longest title of a movie, A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. Another movie with a red poster. Any of this, did any of this make your list for anybody here?
I tried to watch it. Couldn't get it.
Shudder. Yeah.
Shudder. I shudder at the fact that this is Daddy's number 1.
It's not my number 1. I actually had this movie listed as a 2014 release. I have November 21st, 2014. But I don't mind it because I watched it much later, and it wasn't a theatrical release anyway, right? It was a streaming release.
Maybe that's the confusion because I had it as 2014, and then at some point I moved it to 2015.
I'm all for it. Actually, I scrolled up because I couldn't believe that I didn't bring up some of my other movies, and this was one of them. It's definitely a notable release that people should be aware of. It wouldn't crack my top 3 in either scenario. So
now the reason why it's number 2 for me, and there are some other contenders here that if I had got a chance to watch them, may have swapped out because, like I said, this or sort of what you were saying, for me, there's a lot of like number 2s where I feel like there's not anything that just stands out, but I had to go with my heart. And A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night is, to me, maybe a bit more, I hesitate to say art film, but I'm going to say art /
it's definitely
indie film.
artsy. The thing that I think my immediate takeaway from this movie and memorable thing is it's really, really cool. Like it just has a coolness factor that a lot of other movies don't have.
And it does feel cool, and there's a I want almost calmness about it. There's just this feeling. It's presented in black and white.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of space in the scenes. There's a lot of, I don't know. I get the feeling of when I watched Eraserhead, even though it's not like that.
No,
odd.
That makes sense.
It just, I don't know. There's just a lot of ambiance going on with the sound effects and everything. But what it's about is it starts off with this guy. He's probably, actually, I don't really know how old he is. 20s?
Yeah.
Like mid-20s probably. Yeah. And I don't know. You kind of see sort of his daily life. And you learn that his father is addicted to some drug, I think heroin.
Yep, he's a junkie.
I don't know. Yeah, so he's racked up quite a bill with the local drug purveyor / enthusiast. And that guy's quite a character. He's one of those characters.
Small business owner.
Yeah, exactly. He's one of those characters that you're not sure. Like, you could totally see this guy looking exactly the way he looks in the movie outside of the movie and just being sort of not being a drug dealer, but he's wearing like,
it's extremely over
gold,
the top.
Yeah, he's like gold chains, weird haircut.
Yeah.
I don't know, all sorts of bling and just kind of a weird dude, like velvety tiger on the back jacket.
Yeah.
So, just like a very specific look. And you learn that this kid, the main character, has a car that he's worked a very long time to buy. I think it's an old like 60s Thunderbird. And when his father's bill, when he comes to collect, his father doesn't have any money. And so the guy says, the drug dealer's like, I'm going to take your car. So that's kind of like the crux of what sets this whole thing in motion. But besides that, there's this woman who exists in this town called apparently Bad City.
Yeah.
And I know. We follow this. There. Don't we all? We follow this drug dealer, and he's kind of he's not very nice to women, we'll say. And this girl, this force, this vampire,
there it
is sort of stalking him. And you sort of learn throughout, it's never explicitly told, but you sort of learn these motivations and what the reasoning for a lot of things is just through watching the movie, and it's just sort of offhandedly presented to you for you to sort of piece together yourself. It's not like obfuscated on purpose. It's not like you need to decode this movie to get it, but if you pay attention, you'll understand sort of what's going on. So it seems to me that she only kills people who are like men who are bad to women or do bad things. That's
correct.
kind of like her deal.
Yep. She is
And
a
so-
virtuous vampire.
Yes, exactly. We don't know why. It's never really explained. She
Because
doesn't
she's
even
cool.
seem. Yeah, she is cool. She's like
cool.
the embodiment of cool.
Yeah, she hangs
she-
out. She does cool dances. She listens to good music. She's
She
a cool chick.
skateboards.
Yeah.
But she's like not like she's not setting out to do it. She just does. I don't know. It's hard to explain, but you do like you get this sense that she's cool, and so she basically exacts her vengeance on this drug dealer guy, at the same time that our main character is kind of there to sort of stand up to drug dealer guy and get his car back, and so they kind of end up crossing paths, and then they meet again at another point. But basically, all you need to
She
know,
likes him because he's nice and he's good.
you get the sense that he's like the first guy that she's met who's not an asshole.
Yep.
Or something. He has this sort of naivete about him. You see in another scene where he's like, he's telling because this is, I believe it's a Indian film,
Iranian.
or Iranian, excuse me. Like he says to this one rich girl who she's rich because the house that she lives in, and she had a nose job. So like it's just these things that they add into the character without explicitly telling you what's going on. That she can't be in the same room with him because her parents would be upset that she's in the room by herself with another man. Like those sort of cultural things that he adheres to that kind of make him a good guy, I guess, at least from their cultural standpoint. And that's kind of what attracts her to him. And things happen in the story that I won't necessarily get into, but they try to sort of have a relationship or start a relationship while the actions that she takes affects his life very personally. And even the few other people around the town, it's very strange because you get the sense that like nobody lives here. This town is almost deserted, kind of feels like. When people walk down the streets, there's only like one other person there.
It's kind of empty.
Yeah, you get this weird sense. And so it's kind of this haunting sort of just cool indie artsy vampire film that the vampire aspect doesn't really take center stage.
Now you hit
but
my
it
notes.
it's a very it's a very important aspect in this mosaic of this just weird kind of one of a kind film.
Like I said, it wouldn't have cracked my top 3 last year or this year, so I'm happy to talk about it a little bit more. I should have mentioned last week, but I guess the way that I had scrolled on my list, it was hidden. It was like up above where I was looking at. The thing that I like about this movie, 2 things. It's cool. It's very like super indie cool. Like that they do that very, very well. It's like the Scott Pilgrim of horror foreign films, if you will. But the thing that I like about it most is it's a vampire movie that really doesn't care at all to explain to you why anybody's a vampire. And I think that plays into the title of the movie. Her being a vampire is basically like her being weaponized or empowered. And I think that's like the big takeaway from the movie. It's not about her being a vampire or if she, what happens in the daylight or her need to feed or anything like that. It's literally just, you could replace it with her having a knife or her having a gun, and it's like the same take. It's just her way of fighting evil and injustice. And that's basically, I think, at least that's my takeaway from the movie. I don't know. I can't really speak to metaphors and symbology and all that, but that was my takeaway from the movie. And I think that was my most, that was just my greatest takeaway from the movie, was just kind of that. It's very cool. She's very self-assured and very confident, and she's just a very empowering character. And that's why she's so cool. She's very confident.
She's very quiet too. She has like this quiet strength about her, which I think it kind of plays into why you're sort of, you're not scared of her, but it's kind of, she's almost like wild animal-esque because you never know what she's thinking or what she's going to do. She's very quiet. And so it kind of makes you uneasy because you're not really sure where she lies on this whole being a vampire thing. And so while it's not objectively scary, it is horrible in the sense that she is a vampire. But like you said, if she had a knife, that would also be horrible.
Yeah.
But, you know, that's really the only aspect of, like, if she's going around killing dudes, she's still killing dudes.
Yeah. Oh no, she's a total badass, and she's to be fearful.
That vampire has an AR-15.
But that's the thing, like, she's fearful, but like you wouldn't expect it, right? And that's the whole play on the title. She's walking alone at night, which typically, if you were a woman walking alone at night in the middle of the street, like, it's not necessarily the best position to put yourself in, and like you're taught that, you know, like that's a thing that society breeds, but not her. Why? Because, well, she's empowered. She has this ability, and she used it with justice in mind. That's the other thing that she does that other vampire movies, you know, it's a different, refreshing, different take on the vampire genre, for sure, and it's beautifully shot.
Yes.
Yeah, it's one of the easiest black and white recommendations I could ever think to make.
Agreed. So
Nice.
A girl walks home alone at night. What a mouthful.
Is everybody done their number 2?
Yeah.
All right, so we're down to number 1.
Now, before you get to your number 1, Donnie, now you said you think we're going to fight over your number 1.
Nope,
Now,
I think we're going to fight over your number 1.
Okay, so here's my question. I'm based on that sentence, our number 1s aren't going to be the same.
They are not. I'm
So
going out on a limb here. I am presuming that I know what your number 1 is.
So your implication is that my number 1 didn't even crack your top 3.
If it's true, your number 1 does not crack my top 3.
Okay.
Well,
It's-
and now
Here's the
and
thing.
maybe we will fight.
To make you feel better, it is number 4. So don't wait for me to I'm not going to crush it, but
so
I have an axe to grind.
Or I'm going to grind my axe on your ass.
Okay.
Can, just for everybody else's sake, just know that I have no idea what's going on right now. And I'm also curious because I feel like it doesn't matter. I'm curious what you think my number 1 is then, because you kind of,
If our number
Well,
1's
here's the funny thing is I told you guys this, 2 weeks ago?
yeah.
You know, I told you ahead of time. I it's not that I don't even know. Like, I could be completely wrong and I would be shocked, but I feel
you
like
said recently that your number 1 was a surprise to you. In fact, you said it within the last 3 days.
No. Again, not my movie. I'm talking about what I expect to be Josh's movie. I
Well,
feel like
if
I
that's
know.
what you think, I thought it was 2014.
I feel like I know. I think a little bit about Josh, and we've shared a lot of opinions and movies over the time. That I expect that I know what Josh's number 1 is.
gotcha.
His number 1 is also a very highly touted movie, and not that I disagree with it. I just think it's been ran with a little bit too far. So,
Okay.
but let's save it and let me get mine out of the way. My number 1 movie for 2015 is Bone Tomahawk.
That is not okay.
Have you
Sorry.
guys seen this movie?
I don't think
It has
so.
Sid Haig, Kurt Russell, David Arquette, Patrick Wilson, Lily Simmons, and Richard Jenkins in it.
I'm familiar from the poster. I have seen
It is a horror Western movie. This is the movie that I just watched. It might be recency bias, but I totally kind of loved it. It's not like an amazing movie, but again, I told you 2015 I feel like are a lot of B's and a lot of B pluses, right? This movie has a great cast. It does tell a really good story, and here's the thing, it's kind of brutal. In a light Eli Roth kind of way. It's not hostile, but it gets there. It gets a little it fringes there. It's more like Misery in the gore and grasping part, right? It gets there. Again, it's funny. It has a good story, and it basically is it's a Western take on cannibals. Cannibals come, they steal the dude's wife, and then the town rallies up to go hunt them down. And then all kinds of stuff ensues, right? Dude's got a bum leg and all kinds of stuff. And basically,
Comedy ensues.
here's the funny part about it. Kurt Russell is basically Wyatt Earp. It's like Tombstone 2 with cannibals in it. He's just the same guy. It's really funny. I just watched this for the first time because when you're searching for movies for 2015, it comes up. It has this great cast. So I was like, I've never seen it. I've got to watch it. I didn't even know it was a horror movie. I've seen the trailer and I thought it was a Western. I was like, that's why I don't think I ever watched it. I wrote down this. This is one of my favorite lines that I've ever seen delivered in a horror movie. At some point in time in this movie, somebody walks in Kurt Russell's house and he goes, "Why are you in my breakfast?" And he does it in that Tombstone badass Kurt Russell way. And I was like, dude, that is great. And it's kind of a play on like Manifest Destiny, and not themes are not refreshing. Like we've seen this with other like Indian movies and stuff like that. It's kind of that, right? Where they feel like they're not divine. It's not like a religious thing, but they are better people, right? They're savages in the woods. Like you can't go out there because of savages and stuff like that. Right. So it kind of plays on all of that. And then I just think the cast is a really good time. I think it's funny. It's Tarantino-esque. Actually, it's kind of like if I could imagine if Tarantino wanted to make a horror movie with cowboys, that Bone Tomahawk might be pretty close. So in a sea of what I think are good to pretty good movies, this one was a recent find for me that I've never heard of, and I had a really good time. I enjoyed my 2 hours with it, so I thought it was really good. But without further ado, Josh, what's your number one movie?
Well, here's what I'll say before I get to that. So I have owned Bone Tomahawk.
Oh, never mind. I thought maybe I was the only one that saw it.
No, that's the thing. I've owned it for 2 years now. I have not watched it.
Oh,
it's just in my Blu-ray collection. However, it didn't come up when I searched horror films for 2015, and honestly, I didn't know it was a horror film. I thought it was a Western.
Right.
I did hear there was just one specific scene that was brutal. But that's all I heard. So not for a lack of like wanting to see it, because at the point where I bought this movie, I wasn't buying movies like I used to buy movies. I was being selective, right? Like I was just hearing. So I listened to the Doug Loves Movies podcast, where he constantly has industry professionals on. In fact, he's had Annabelle on, the actual doll, the guy who created it. So like they praised this movie for a solid year, so that's why I bought it. I just never saw it, but I own it, which makes it very easy for me to watch it before we record again.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I guess it surprises me more that you picked it, only because I didn't know it was a horror film. I just thought it was a Western. That has nothing to do with why you picked it. It's just my perception of the film.
I always thought the same thing, and it wasn't until I looked it up that I saw people classifying as a horror movie. And I will even admit that I think that classification is loose.
Well, damn, I would have watched I have it sitting under my TV. I would have just popped it in my Xbox.
But it definitely, it's about cannibals, and some of the scenes are very horrific, and it's about abduction and like all of these things. Like, yeah, what else is it going to be? It's a Western horror movie, kind of.
That's not even covered under the trailer.
Like if Green Inferno is a horror movie, then so is Bone Tomahawk. Because in a lot of ways they have so much more. They have a lot of parallels.
Green Inferno covers, what you're getting in the trailer.
Sure, of course you do. You know what you're getting who the director is.
Yeah, you have no clue in Bone Tomahawk's trailer.
But to pull one of your cards, I am a devout fan of Lily Simmons. I love her and everything she does. My wife hates seeing her because I see her and I stand up a little and she's like, calm down. Would you stop? That's definitely an actress I absolutely love. And I didn't even know she was in it when I rented it. So that was a huge surprise. When I watched it, my wife was like, of course.
Of course you did. Donnie, I hate you.
But it's good. A lot of it's really good because of Patrick. Look here, dude. Hang on a second. I forgot his name. Richard Jenkins, right? Cabin in the Woods. We've talked about him several times. His character in this, I didn't even I had a hard time even recognizing it was him. Like so much makeup and everything. So between him, Patrick Wilson, and Kurt Russell, they have this constant back and forth and go between, and that banter's funny. It kind of gives a lightness to what's going on until it all starts going wrong. And like I said,
watch this.
It's bone crunching kind of gore, not like, rip, it is somewhat gory. Like there are gory moments, but it's more about like the sound effects and the swiftness and like, it's that impact. That's why I bring up like Misery comes to mind. It's that, it's like we're about to break your hand. You're like, it's that like that. And I really enjoyed it. That was good.
Great. Well, I mean, I will for sure watch it, especially since it's your number one and I own it. So, yeah, I'm a great excuse to watch it. So, I guess, I mean, if you guessed my number one, I mean,
Can I guess?
I mean, you can guess. I mean, it's probably pretty obvious, right?
I think it's It Follows.
Yeah, it is. It Follows. And in fact, I rewatched it because I didn't have confidence in it being my number one. However, when I rewatched it, I was rewatching it in the 2014 eyes.
Yep.
Because I went by the South by Southwest premiere instead of following the rules, I guess. Regardless, for 2015 at least, out of the movies I've seen, I have a long, long list. And that list is even longer now with Bone Tomahawk of movies I haven't seen. But out of the movies I've seen from 2015, It Follows still hits number one for me. And there's a lot of reasons why I understand why it might not hit for people and even for you. But what It Follows does is it also, and I won't say what my number one for 2016 is, but it was going to be my number one for this year. It hits on the same theme. It's suspense. It's not about what is the worst that can happen to you. It is what is going to happen to you. However, It Follows does both of those. It Follows has this overwhelmingly sense of dread, but when dread catches up to you, it's exactly as bad as you pictured it. It's breaking your knees backwards. It's snapping your neck. It's doing these things to you that you were originally terrified of. But you, like an old lady chasing you, what do you have to worry about, right?
Your mom killed you by humping you.
Right. What? Yeah, exactly. Mom, mom, what are you doing? Don't open the door, Mom. Don't open the door. Okay, so yeah, like it just like the soundtrack, I would argue, is 30% of that film, maybe even more.
Yeah, it's good.
It follows along with those films where the silence is the most uncomfortable part, and then it builds up to lead you to believe something's going to happen and nothing happens. They really play with you emotionally. But I think in this movie, it takes about 35 minutes to get to feel like empathy for the main character, because you really don't know her from go.
Right.
But you really start to feel for this person. And it turns into this thing like I talked about, like we're talking about now an emotional film over a horror, where I would argue emotions are 10 times more terrifying than someone chopping your arm off. And I think you really feel that with this girl and her friends who seemingly can't get, like, just let her go. Like, and then you start to realize, like, humanity is at risk in this film. She's giving up her humanity. So for people who don't know what It Follows, like, it's essentially an STD, right? Like, this is a terror, a ghost, a demon, whatever you want to call it, that travels through sexual intercourse, and it doesn't stop there. So, like, if I catch It Follows, you don't ever get a proper name for it, I can pass it on to someone. But if they die, it comes back to me. So then you're also never safe. You're never comfortable unless you live your life following the person you gave it to. And what kind of life is that? This movie is so much more horrifying on the level of living your life than anything else. Like Freddy, yeah, Freddy's gonna kill me in my sleep. I get it. It Follows, I never know. And I don't even know what form this thing's gonna take. And sometimes you see like some of these forms and they're fucking terrifying. But sometimes they're not intimidating at all. In the part where they're on the beach and she's finally relaxed and you just see this person walking behind her and no one else can see this person. And if she would just turn around, she would stop, she would run. But it doesn't happen. And this thing, you see her sister, see her hair get pulled up above her head. And finally, people believe her. This is another movie where, like, you're with the protagonist and you see everything they see, but you're frustrated because no one else sees what you see. You're in their shoes. So it's validation, right? The first time you see her hair get pulled up by this thing, you're validated. You're like, yes, these people finally see like what this girl's going through. They don't think she's crazy anymore, except it doesn't. Like they still think she's crazy. And this kid, like, why did you break my door? Why is this happening? And it doesn't, it never resolves necessarily for this person because, and it follows in this world, you're never safe. And that's the scariest part of this movie. You're never safe. Like you can't get rid of it because it will always come back for you. And I think that's like the scariest part of the film is like you can escape Jason. You can kill Jason. You can kill Freddy on paper. I mean, maybe you can't. You can never escape this. And it's just, for me, rewatching it, thinking it might not make number one, man, there's so many times in my life where this could have applied to me. It follows his HPV. Like, it's terrifying. There's no way to get around it.
If it makes you feel any better, this is my number one as well. I felt the same, and I do feel like it. When I first saw this movie, I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I thought it was great. Upon second watching, I watched it with a movie buff friend of mine, and I immediately was like, okay, the acting isn't as great as I remember, that type of thing. And I started apologizing for it or whatever, but the sum of its parts are what really give it its strengths, because there are weaknesses in the film, but like you said, there are so many strengths as well. The music, it almost feels like if Steven Spielberg directed a movie, and I know that's really high praise, a horror movie, but it does have that like Stranger Things, Kids on Bikes vibe, where it's these kids tackling some things that they really shouldn't have to be worrying about right now in their lives. And I guess for me, I agree too, that it is that overwhelming sense that you are never safe. But not only that, but once you get it, you have to make the conscious decision to give it to somebody else. And like, how do you go about navigating that whole thing as well? And yeah, I don't know. There's just so much about it. It feels sort of like a send up of 80s horror. And there's also this weird, it's like our world, but not quite, because there's some technology there. Like the girl who's reading on this like clamshell makeup thing. Yeah.
That's the one hang up my wife could not get out of that movie. She kept trying to figure it out, and she kept asking. She's like, where are they? I'm like, why are you paying attention to this? Who cares? That is not what this movie's about at all.
It is weird, though. That is, and he's watching 60s sci-fi.
Yeah. She's got like an egg tablet or whatever.
Clamshell iPhone.
One of the other things I noticed upon rewatching is how many like little, not Easter eggs, but background touches they did where, sometimes you'll see in the background, somebody's walking straight towards the camera.
Yeah.
Straight towards the character. There's some times where what's that?
Especially at the end.
Yeah, exactly. There's just times where you'll notice, I think I just saw somebody clearly walking right towards the character for like a split second. But also when he's watching some of those movies, or when the characters are watching some of those movies, if you listen to what's being said there, it's basically illustrating the relationship between the male friend and the main character and that type of thing. So there are a lot of little touches throughout the movie that kind of add up to edging this back into number one for me. I will admit, having seen it multiple times now, it has its flaws.
Yeah.
But if you get past those, it is a very strong movie.
Okay.
Well done.
Yeah.
Are you done?
Yes, we're done.
Look, I'm not going to tell you that it's bad, so don't brace for like the
You
worst.
said it was your number 4, right?
It was number 4. I admit that it's good. If anything, it's contemporary and it's novel. I do have an axe to grind with this movie. I think in particular, I think it's like a personal axe. I think it's the high praise that it's received, and I think it's the people that go out there and they compare it to things like Spielberg and Wes Craven and Carpenter and that stuff.
Oh boy,
that really seems. I was always bothered by it. I was bothered by it on release. If you go to Metacritic or Rotten Tomatoes, this is one of the highest rated horror movies of all time. And really? I don't get it. Again, not saying it's bad. It was on my list in a year that I said I think I have a lot of B movies, right? To put this though in the rare air of the best horror movies of all time, by ratings and accolades and praise, I think is a bit much. And I think it's from a social movement of standing up for sexual awareness and sexual predators and a lot of things that people are extrapolating from this movie that I can see why they would draw those conclusions, but I don't necessarily think they were ever meant to be there. The director, I've forever tried to figure out exactly what the ending of this movie is supposed to be telling. The director himself said that the concept came from a nightmare where he was just constantly being followed and couldn't escape. And he says a lot of his idea for the script was like dream logic. That's why a lot of things are weird and they don't make sense. But you put that together and then people take it out and they're like, it's a metaphor for sexual STDs and everything. And they run with it. And I honestly feel like the accolades are just kind of setting up a platform for them to make a political opinion. And I think that's why the movie gets some of the feedback that it does. Because while I agree that it's a good movie, it's definitely a good movie. It's a good horror film. And it's number 4. It's on my list. I'm not trying to crush it. I have a lot of issues with the plot itself that I think take me out of the horror movie overall. First and foremost, Josh, you mentioned that you can beat Jason, you can beat Freddy. You can beat It Follows if you walk at a brisk pace.
No, you can never beat it. It will chase you till you're dead.
Right, but you can just walk faster. Like that is so much of the movie is it just walks. If you had 2 apartments and you drove to one and then drove to the other and you kept doing that.
It's not always the same being though. That's the thing about It Follows.
I understand.
Well, we don't know what the full capability of its powers are either.
I don't.
Which is leaving it open and
Your
ended.
defense is like it's not punk anymore, and you're a punk rocker. You're like, oh my god, people like horror movies. I hate it. Like that.
I don't think so. I don't think that's the case at all.
You said you didn't like it because it had a high Metacritic.
That's not why. That's not why I didn't like it. It's not that I didn't. I think it's undeserving. Those are different points. I don't mind movies that score well. I think it's undeserving of that high praise. Also, I really didn't like the fact that in the movie nobody can see it, but apparently they can all fight it. You can't see it, but you could shoot it, and you could throw a blanket over it, but you can't see it when it's coming. It's like so what the hell is it? Is it a real thing? Is it not a real thing? Like in the way they play with that, I don't know. I think it's a good movie. I do, but that's all I think it is. I just think it's a good movie. I
was just going to say, I feel like what you are saying is that it might have been left a little bit too much to interpretation to the point where they didn't really specify enough. Sometimes you can say things and they're so broad that anybody can take anything out of the statement that you said.
And I actually think your point of, like if you had it, would you give it to somebody else? Right. That's a really great, topic to play on. I wish the movie did more with that, I think.
You have to give it to someone else.
And then also, does that actually play to like, you know, if this was AIDS or if it was HIV or something like that, does that actually play? Are those the same? I don't necessarily think they're the same. I don't think they're the same decisions. But I like the thought. Like, I like the thought provokingness of it. And I do think it does have its moments where it is scary. Again, I don't not like it. I think rewatching it, I actually think I rewatched it this week too, bracing for this conversation, because I've had this conversation with other horror movie friends, and trust me, I understand. I always feel that this is one where I feel like I'm left out. You know, I just feel like I'm left out because I don't think it's the greatest movie of the decade or the most refreshing horror movie of the, you know, the new century, or a 95 on Metacritic. You know, this is up there with like the epics of the industry, and I just don't get it. So again, I'm not trying to crush it or anything. It's just, I knew this was going to come up. And so yeah, I have some different thoughts on the movie than I guess that are normally popular.
I don't think it beats my number one for next year. I don't think it's the number one movie of the decade, but I think
a lot of people do.
I think it's a remarkably original horror film, and that you don't agree with the parts that I think that make it remarkable, and that's fine, because we talked about last 2 episodes ago how there's so many different genres of horror that it is impossible. And the fact that you and Lucas lined up last episode is astronomical.
Yeah, that is actually kind of crazy. And I love that we don't share. You know, like that's the thing. We all come here with different ideas. And I only knew that was going to be Josh's movie just from having known Josh for so long. And we've shared this type of stuff.
I didn't want you to think. Well, my worry is that you thought that you made a judgment on me based on popularity, and that's what I didn't want.
No, actually, I think as I talked about, like in our intro to our shows, right, the type of stuff that we're into, I think the genre would appeal to you in more ways than it would appeal to me. I think your empathy for other things and I think your causes that you really believe in, I think would make this movie appeal to you more than it would appeal to me. So honestly, it had nothing to do with its popularity. I literally just looked at It Follows and was like, that's a Josh movie. I was like 100%. I know Josh, and I guarantee you that's going to be Josh's number one movie. And I was like, uh-oh.
I would say that.
Uh-oh, I'm going to have to be the guy that argues with Josh on his favorite movie.
Here's what I would say, because Lucas and I are going to outvote you. However,
I know.
What I would say is, when we do our recap show, I would challenge Lucas and I to both watch Bone Tomahawk and specifically revisit this rating, because I know we talked about like I want to rewatch, but we've never had a disparity like from 1 to 4 between the 3 of us.
Yeah,
I think this is worth a revisit. That if we watch Bone Tomahawk, that we revisit this.
And I'm all for that. I just want to say, like, I realize that my issues I think are personal, and popularity alone, if you just look at like widespread opinion, I'm completely outvoted. I have no problem with this movie being the representative for this year. I like the movie. I own the movie.
Like, too. So like this may not be unprecedented. It might be the first time, but I think we need to be open to when we do that recap show.
I'm very interested to hear what people think if they watch it, because like the whole ghost part of it really bothered me, because they fight it and they have this whole thing and they try to electrocute it. They shoot it, it bleeds, but you can't see it. It doesn't have any matter. It's like, what the hell is it? And then you realize that they couldn't kill it at all, and they just live with it anyway. And it's just like, well, then what was the point of any of it? Which is where I kind of come back to the writer director's original points of it. Yeah. You know, and I think the STD idea, the extrapolation of that, I think is a powerful one. I wish the movie actually leaned into that more. I think it would have made a better movie. Yeah. I think all of that is loose interpretation that people are pulling out of something that I'm not necessarily sure is there, because it's not on record. The director didn't like put it there. The writer didn't put it there. Like, yeah, that's just what people think about it. You know, like they leave it very open-ended in that regard. So yeah.
I mean, this just speaks to the year 2015 and kind of the time that I had with trying to figure out what my list was going to be. Can I quickly run down some of the other movies on my list that didn't top the top 3?
Absolutely.
Creep was a very big...
You said it right when Josh leaves.
Yeah, I know.
I'm afraid that's what he said is his 2016 movie. So are you sure on that date?
I'm not 100% sure, but I thought it was 2014 and it's 2015. Well, I guess maybe we'll find out. Maybe it has a chance to come back in 2016. Crimson Peak, which we talked a little bit about, wasn't going to make the list, but still, it was kind of like, what happens when I go back and check out these movies again?
Del Toro.
Yes.
I rewatched Crimson Peak. It's another one that I own. I rewatched it this week for preparation for this one, and it did like solidify that it's a horror movie, but it's not one that I'm like particularly overly fond of. It's okay. It's a bit slow. It's a bit predictable. I think outside of Jessica Chastain, it's not particularly like outstanding
Notable.
or memorable.
Yeah.
My wife loves Charlie Hunnam, Jax from Sons of Anarchy, and I think he's not a great actor, and so I tease her about him quite often. And watching this, actually last week is the first time she watched this movie, and she was like, "Oh, Jax, just stop,
Get back on your motorcycle,
please."
This one bears rewatching because I had a hard time being able to sit down and watch it. What We Do in the Shadows, which is the comedy vampire movie,
It's another one I've never liked.
Very highly touted. I don't know if I didn't like it or if it was the issues I had. The Voices was a Netflixation with Ryan Reynolds. I remember it being way better than I thought it was going to be. Interesting look on sort of, if I remember correctly, psychosis or the just mental illness in general. Unfriended.
That was on my short list.
Surprised me.
I think the movie is a lot better than people think.
It's good?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's surprising at how well a show about people sitting at their computers and talking to each other.
Here's another thing. It's very foreshadowing for Host, which we'll talk about in a future episode. But Unfriended was kind of like the first kind of take on that. And I think they do it very well.
Yeah, I thought it was. You told me. I think you had said that it's worth checking out because I was interested in it, and you said, "Yeah, do it," and I did, and I didn't regret it. What I did regret was checking out a movie that escaped my radar, and I remember seeing a trailer for it in the theater, and I thought it looked cool. Backcountry. Do you remember this movie?
Oh.
It was the bear attack movie.
Yep.
A couple goes camping and. It's a bear attack. Wow, what a stinker. It was not great. I was very disappointed, especially after watching something like The Revenant, where you're just like, holy cow, nature can be really brutal sometimes.
Yeah.
Another one of those movies like Bone Tomahawk, where the reality of the situation and how what can happen to your body, it had great effects, except for the bear. And the two main characters were just, I couldn't stand them. So really bummed about that one because I thought it might be a sneak in, like at the last minute, top the charts deal. So yeah, there you go. The most movies I've had so far in 1 year.
Yeah.
My short list included Unfriended, The Final Girls, Spring, Sinister 2, The Lazarus Effect, The Green Inferno.
Lazarus Effect is one that keeps coming up.
Oh,
and should I watch that?
Effect is on my list too.
I put Insidious Chapter 3 on the list, but it's not good.
Yeah, that was like number 4 on the Billboard charts, or whatever.
So Lazarus Effect has Mark Duplass in it.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
Mark Duplass is in my number 4 movie for the year,
Which
was Creep.
Lucas
That's
said it
the
right
same
when you stepped away.
You walked away.
I was like, no, Josh missed it.
Sorry, yeah,
I said
I
it
stepped
bears
away.
watching for me because I liked it a lot. I just don't know if it tops these others.
The Creep hits new levels of film, and that's why it would have been number 3 if I hadn't had to rearrange my order for films. It's just so different, and
It is.
if you look into like how he came about doing this, like I think it adds more to the enjoyment of the film, like knowing the backstory. So like I missed Lucas's list, but for my list I had Creep, which would have been number 4, Crimson Peak, which I haven't seen,
That was my number 5.
Extinction, which has Matthew Fox, who was in Donnie's movie, but it also has Jeffrey Donovan, who was in Touching Evil and Burn Notice, who I absolutely love. It doesn't hurt that he's from Massachusetts. And that's a film I didn't even know existed until we started doing this research, and I just didn't get to watching it. Krampus. I started watching Maggie, but it really didn't seem like it was going to fit our style.
I wondered
of
about that.
podcast. Basically, it's Arnold Schwarzenegger plays Abigail Breslin's dad. She gets bit by a zombie, and the movie's about like the degradation of her becoming a zombie. And he has some like tie to a person or a corporation who's letting her get out of the hospital so we can deal with her on his own. Jolie Richardson's the wife. She's a very great actress. I'll still finish the film. I stopped watching because I didn't think it was going to fit with what we're going through.
I'm glad I didn't then, because I like Arnie. I wondered if it would fit into this.
He seems to be acting very well, which is not typical Arnie. Lazarus Effect made the list. Poltergeist, the Sam Rockwell remake, made the list.
Yeah, that was on the
Scout's Guide to the Zombie Apocalypse.
It's a good one.
The Visit, and We Are Still Here. That's the rest of my list.
We Are Still Here. Have you seen it?
No.
I watched it. Preparing for this was when I found. I did not think that was particularly good at all. Kind of good as a indie horror movie. Like, it's not worth watching, but middling.
The director is not what I would argue a great director.
I read his first movie that was something like Playmates Gone Wild.
The International Playboy's first movie, Ghouls Gone Wild.
Yeah, my wife was like, my wife looked at me and she was like, I want to watch that instead of this.
Yeah, his second movie was We Are Still Here.
Yeah, it's unoriginal.
Sounds like it, yeah.
Okay.
Gotta start somewhere.
So, I mean, it's fair to say that we've got our movie for 2015 and It Follows. And that'll do it for us here in this episode in 2015 as we look forward to the year of 2016 as we start to we're over the hump. It's a hump day. Like we're rounded in the form, headed towards home. So we hope you join us on the next episode for 2016. But until then, this is the end, friends.
Hi, I'm Chucky, and I'm your friend to the end. Heidi ho! Ha ha ha!